Hi guys, Robert here. So in this video, let's talk about the spiritual ego, right? The word ego gets thrown around a lot, and I kind of go into, what the ego is and its primary functions and stuff like that in my other videos. So I'm not going to get into that here, but let's talk about the spiritual ego, right? Because if you found this video, right, chances are you're probably a pretty spiritual person, right? You have maybe a spiritual practice. Um, you try to advance spiritually, right, in your everyday life, and you probably see things a little differently, right? So, for those of us who, are spiritual and consider ourselves spiritual, we have to be very careful, right? Because the ego is very tricky, right? And as we make progress in this journey, right, in relation to spirituality, we can sometimes get into that trap of the ego as well, even though, it's the spiritual ego, but it's the ego nonetheless, right? Because when we start on our journey and we make some progress, maybe we understand things a little differently, right? We see the bigger picture, right? We see things in a different way than many other people, or maybe even the way you used to see things, right? So we come to a point where we think we know a lot, right? And we think we know more than other people, right? And it gets very tricky because you don't want to identify, right, as you thinking just because you're spiritual and you have spiritual knowledge, therefore you're better than somebody who maybe isn't, spiritual or isn't that in that circle, right? And a lot of people even sometimes talk about how the spiritual ego might be a little worse, right? Because you are very spiritual, right? So you try to be kind and all the good stuff, whatever it is. But you still can get hung up on just you thinking maybe, well, because I'm spiritual, therefore I'm better than this person, or I know more, right? I have more knowledge, so I should tell this person, how to be or how to live, or convince them, about how they should be spiritual and they should, advance spiritually and how to do that, right? So it's very tricky because you never want to I know we want to help a lot of the time, right? And um, but we have to be careful because not everybody is searching for it, right? Not everybody in their journey is in need of it right now. So your objective is, you know, to maybe help those people and enlighten those people if they are on that path, right? Also, you don't want to just start preaching this to anybody and everybody, right? Because it's not their path. But a lot of the times, when we make spiritual advancements, we want to share this with everybody and convince everybody and just open up their world to whatever is going on in yours. And you should be very careful, right? Because you should never do that, right? If somebody comes into your life and is searching and in need of that information, somehow you guys will get on the topic and somehow it will find you and find them, right? But if you meet somebody and it's, you don't discuss anything relatively even close to this subject and you want to just talk about this and don't do that, all right? The spiritual ego is a real thing, right? And a lot of people talk about it because now all of a sudden you, like I said earlier, right, you gain that knowledge, you gained a lot of wisdom, right? You see things differently, and it's very easy for the ego to attach to that identity as well, right? And when your ego attaches to that identity of a spiritual person, of you know of that, just being in that circle, right? That's also the ego, right? um, you have to be very aware, very self-conscious, right? Do a lot of self inventory, as I like to call it, right? And be very careful what you do, because it does sneak up on you, right? And then it's even worse maybe than, kind of just being in your normal ego, whatever that means, because ego is still ego, right? Because here you become very um, you think you have become very present, very aware, right? But then slowly you start to identify yourself as that spiritual person, as that person who knows more than others, right? Maybe that person that knows better than others, right? And guess what? That's still attachment to ego, except now your ego found a new identity, a spiritual identity, right? Um, so it's not maybe in the same traditional way when people, like I said, talk about the ego, but here it attaches to just a new form, new way of thinking, right? And then starts to add to that identity and what it means to be that person. And, like I said, maybe tries to convince others no matter what. And when you do that, you go out of consciousness, right? You go unconscious trying to convince somebody of something, because that comes from the ego, right? If you can have a normal conversation with somebody and um, present your viewpoints, but not attaching anything to the outcome, meaning you don't try to persuade somebody to whatever it is you believe, um, then you can have a normal conversation. But like I said, it becomes very tricky, right? So for you, for you guys that are, like I said, very spiritual, just be very mindful of this, very careful of this, because, like I said, it's another form of attachment, another label that you create for yourself, right? And you are not those labels. You are not most of the things you think you are, right? But that's another conversation for another day, right? So if you like this type of conversations and material, please subscribe, share, comment, right? Please let me know your thoughts on this topic, right? Um, because not a lot of people talk about this, especially like in the maybe your spiritual groups, maybe your meditation circles, or whatever it may be, right? Not a lot of people think about um, ego and kind of its attachment to your spiritual side as well, right? So I have noticed this, just from kind of, my own thought patterns, and sometimes, being in those circles and speaking to other individuals, right? So it's just another way for ourselves to be accountable, right? And have other people hold us to that standard, and also for us to be accountable. So I hope this helped, right? Explaining kind of the spiritual ego, and its new attachment to your new identity, because it is a real thing, right? We need to move away from those labels, from your attachment to creating more labels for yourselves and more names and stuff like that. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.